Two.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome once again to a weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Dr. James Bridgers, Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Acting Deputy Chief of Public Health Services, also for the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, and we have today two special guests with us. Ben Stevenson, who is the Director of the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation for Montgomery County, as well as Joanna Pearl. She is with Moms Demand Action for Guns, Sons in America, Maryland. Members of the media, we're going to get started. And remember, during the Q&A portion of this presentation, to raise your hand. Mr. County Executive, good afternoon to you.
Yeah, good afternoon and hi, everybody. We're going to change things up a little bit today because Dr. Stoddard has to testify in Annapolis. And so we're going to start with the discussion of ICE. Yesterday, we had a good meeting. I thought it was a good meeting with ICE's Baltimore Enforcement and Removal Operations Office. We had representatives from House Representatives member Raskin and from Senator Van Hollen's office, and attended that meeting as well. And I wanted to thank the congressional delegation for helping us arrange the meeting. And I thought it was a lot better to have a face-to-face discussion rather than try to talk about the issues over the phone. During the meeting, Director Darius Reeves and I had I think a productive discussion about improved communications and operational challenges with custody transfers. And the county cleared up some misconceptions about our policy on immigration, and ICE underscored their need for more notice prior to releases. I think the main things that we showed Mr. Reeves was, first of all, we're not a sanctuary county. That's simply not Montgomery County. It was a choice the county chose not to make a number of years ago when it was an option. What we do is limit the degree of cooperation with ICE. However, and as we showed Director Reeves, we have like 2 pages of crimes for which we enforce detainers. And it's anything violent, anything related to sex offenses, child abuse, use of a gun or any other weapon. It's a pretty good list of things that we will deport for, and we will cooperate. And the county also has an arrangement to the jail where anybody we consider to be vaguely dangerous or who might have dangerous friends, we arrange for the transfer inside the building in a secure facility. So we're already doing things with them. It wasn't clear to us that he knew what they were doing or whether they were aware that we actually had a list of things that we cooperated on. We also talked more generally about what we're interested in doing and the things that we don't cooperate on, which are basically low-level crimes. Director Reeves emphasized, and I want to emphasize that he emphasized this, that he was interested in violent crimes, use of guns, drug dealing, prostitution, human trafficking, terrorism. All those things were his high priorities, and they don't put the same priority on everything. In fact, he said, I'm not interested in deporting somebody who maybe took something from the bodega in their neighborhood. So even he had priorities. And so I think our priorities land pretty well. We're having a follow-up meeting. There are a couple of things that were raised that were not on our list that we agreed should be on our list. And in addition, he gave us a list of people who were in our jail currently, who were there for serious crimes, and he wanted to be assured that they would get noticed on these people. And we read the list of people, and we reassured him that every single one of these people, we will work with them on to make sure they go to ICE, or at least ICE is notified, and they have the opportunity to show up and take these people into custody when they're eventually released. All of them were involved in violence. Every single one of those folks had done things that were truly violent and unacceptable. And so we agreed, and that was his request. That's what he gave us. And he asked us to work on notification between us and him. We told them we would set up a work group. I think Dr. Stoddard's going to be part of it, and Ben Stevenson, who runs the jail, is going to be part of it. And that's where we left it. And I think, and I still feel we left it in a good place going forward. This morning, ICE released a statement regarding a detainer on an individual involved in a shooting and homicide in Langley Park. This was not an issue that they brought up in our meeting at all yesterday, so it was a little bit surprising to see this. The person who was subject to that detainer, who created or was involved in a pretty heinous crime that involved the death of a 2-year-old, his arrests were for theft, and they were not on the list of serious crimes or violent crimes. They wouldn't have made, normally, I assumed, his list of violent crimes unless they knew something that we didn't know. We looked back on the documentation. We only found these cases in our records. We know there was a judge's order, but the judge's order had no specificity. So we don't know whether the judge based the decision, for example, on gang membership, or whether the judge based his decision on failure to appear for a hearing. County policy is we wouldn't enforce something like failing to appear for a hearing. If somebody was a gang member, we would give them over to ICE. So hopefully between us and them, we will clarify the information that flows in both directions and be able to work out a more suitable or an improved system between the two of us. But I just want to assure everybody that we do honor detainers, we do deport people or help deport people, and we focus on violent crimes, sex offenses, and the kind of things that Mr. Reeves said were the focus of who he wanted to remove from the community. I have asked Dr. Stoddard and the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation Director Ben Stevenson to be on this briefing to help answer your questions regarding this specific incident. So Lorna, do you want to turn it over to the reporters?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. County Executive. I see several hands are up already. Brad Bell, you're first. ABC 7, good afternoon. Go ahead with your question.
Hey there, good afternoon. So, Mr. Elrich, I mean, are you changing your policies at all here after this meeting? And I mean, I guess, you know, when I talked to Mr. Reeves last week and some of his agents out in the field, they were saying, is it really up to a county executive to decide which detainers they honor? If there's a detainer, shouldn't it be honored? Yeah, so that's my question. Is there a change in your policy? And, you know, what do you say to that notion from some of the federal officials? Maybe he didn't read it with you. Yeah.
If they were intended to be mandatory, they would have been written to be mandatory, and we'd have no choice but to honor them. The fact is, we're not the only jurisdiction that doesn't honor them. What we're doing, though, distinguishes us from the sanctuary jurisdictions because there's a whole range of things on which we'll cooperate. You know, when this all started, you know, people were getting deported for things that are absolutely insignificant crimes. And for you crime buffs out there, the immigrant community is not as inclined toward criminal behavior by statistics as the Native community is here, just as a point of fact. But, you know, it's not a mandatory thing. The state of Maryland says we can't detain people beyond their release date. So that's the point of giving them advance notification. They don't always show up. They give us notification, and we'll say that somebody's being released, and they don't always come from. I would assume this is in the minor cases, not the major cases. But, you know, their priority, as he said to us, was people who committed violent crimes, use of weapons, and those things.
To address your first question, Brad, the areas where the policy is likely going to shift is a couple things the county executive alluded to. First off, we'd been given about 24 hours notice to ICE for the notifications, and they asked that be extended to 48 hours. And so we agree that in situations where we have that extended amount of time, or for example, if it's a release following incarceration, we would give them an additional notice to allow them to make the decision internally about getting their resources down there. Obviously, we acknowledged, and so did the Director Reeves, that there are certain cases where, for example, a judge may release someone at a bond hearing from the courtroom, in which case we won't be able to afford ICE the same opportunity. And they acknowledge that happens all the time in all the jurisdictions across the state. But they were happy to hear that we were willing to extend that time for notification. The other thing that the county executive alluded to is we're going to be reviewing the list of crimes that are on the list. We actually shared that list with Director Reeves and asked for their feedback. And so they can share with us things that they think we're missing that fall into the category of serious crimes. We've already recognized a few that we would like to add. In addition, in the interim of us feeling like the list is fully vetted and fleshed out, and we get the feedback from ICE to acknowledge the changes, I've asked that any detainer that we receive that we're considering denying, that Director Stevenson bring that detainer up to the county executive's office, and I'll review it. And if I need the county executive's advice and feedback on it, we'll go to him. That's actually already happened once, and we ended up giving some information to ICE, and they did, pick up someone who we received a detainer on that last week, actually. And so we're going to flag that process moving forward just for now to make sure that we're not missing anything during this period.
So one point of clarification. So last week when I talked to Mr. Reeves, he said that Montgomery County had honored zero detainers, but you've described a couple that you have honored. So has there been zero cooperation in the fiscal year?
We can point to a very specific case where we received a detainer last week. The principal issue was driving under the influence, and there were some other traffic-related offenses. We notified them of the end of that person's sentence on a Friday. They picked him up at his release on the following Monday. So that, I mean, I don't want to parse words with Director Reeves. I thought we had a very good conversation, but I think that was a clear example of where we provided information and worked with ICE to effectuate that transfer.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Brad. Up next, Jasmine Pelton.
Brad, I just want to be clear about one thing. If it was a crime on our list, and we're happy to provide you guys with what our list is, there's not even an executive decision. We've never had to make these decisions at the executive level. If it's on the list, we don't contest it. So we're not even applying like, let's think about it, to the crimes on the list. And they agreed with the stuff we had on the list, and they'd probably like a couple of additions, and that's what we'll be talking about.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Jasmine Helton, The Washington Post. Good afternoon, Jasmine.
Thank you. Thank you, County Executive. Just wanted to ask if there's any more insight that the Department of Corrections could provide on how the county responded when he was initially arrested in March and September. I know ICE's statement said the detainer wasn't honored on both occasions and, he was released. But I just wonder if the Department of Corrections could provide any additional insight into those two incidents from March and September and how you all responded.
Sure. From the incident in March, in which we received notification from ICE that they wanted to, in fact, hold this person. However, due to the nature of the crime, we did not notify them, and we did not honor that detainer request. The one this past September, we are still looking at information to verify that arrest, because there are a number of conflicting informations in this person's aliases that we want to just verify. So we're still working on verifying that information that you have.
And is my understanding correct that that's because it wasn't honored because it didn't match the list County Executive just mentioned, the severity?
That is correct. It was the first one in March was for theft honor from $1 to under $1,500, and the second. And that wouldn't have been a high level crime in which we would definitely want to cooperate with ICE.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Lily Zhang, Fox 5 DC. Good afternoon, Lily.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for hosting this, County Executive. Just hoping you could clarify, Montgomery County is not designated as a community with sanctuary status. Back in 2019, you signed that executive order promoting community trust, which is my understanding prohibits all executive branch departments from using local government resources to assist federal agents in civil immigration investigations. What is the difference between that executive order and what would be considered as sanctuary status? If you could clarify.
So a sanctuary city would have no list of things for which you turn people over to ICE. We have a long list of things for which we turn people over to ICE. That's what the original debate was about, was more focused around when are you going to cooperate with ICE? And there were people who didn't want us to cooperate at all, and there are people who wanted us to cooperate to varying degrees. And we came up with a pretty comprehensive list. It went through the state's attorney's office. It went through our offices. We had council members sitting around the table talking about how we were going to handle this. And we came up with the list. So it's clearly not sanctuary. If you were in San Francisco or some of these other places, there is zero cooperation. We don't do zero. We're more than happy to cooperate on drug trafficking, human trafficking, any gun trafficking. There's a whole range of things we would actually work with immigration on. It's just not the deportation of individuals for low-level crimes.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add too is that sanctuary jurisdictions typically do not share information about their detainees up through the federal system. So ICE in those circumstances cannot even recognize when someone is being detained who they would want to issue a detainer for. So that we do share that information up through the state of Maryland to the federal database, which is why we're actually able to receive the detainers that we do through ICE, through participation in those federal databases.
Thank you, Lily. Alex Hoff, Fox News as well. Hello, Alex. Good afternoon.
Hello, thank you for having me and everybody here. I had a question about repeat offenders. You have a list of crimes that you will cooperate with ICE on. If a crime doesn't fall on that list, but somebody's stealing something under $1,500 every month, I mean, are there any asterisks to this at all?
So some things had asterisks. I think I got it. But not everything did. And theft is one of the things that didn't. And theft is something, at least in my mind, I'm willing to put on the table to talk about, because I don't want somebody going out and, as you said, stealing every month. In this case, we've got cases separated by, months, at least 6 months. I think both were in 23. That's a discussion that I'm more than willing to have about whether we need to deal with repeats. I'd say the same thing with some of the other offenses on there, because at some point it's too much. But I don't disagree with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. And we have Matthew Faldy, the Spectator. Good afternoon, Matthew.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, with a Spectator here in England, but native Moco guy. I'm wondering, has anyone, county executive, you or anyone else, has been in contact with the woman who was shot by the illegal immigrant? We've have any update on her status? Obviously, we know her kid was murdered, but has there been any news on her end?
I have not heard anything.
But have you?
They're in Prince George's County, so.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you, Matthew. Members of the media, any other questions regarding this particular topic? No more questions related to this topic? Thank you, everybody. Mr. County Executive, we can continue with the rest of the media briefing. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So we're going to ironically discuss gun violence prevention now. A few weeks ago, I told you about how we're continuing to make public safety a high priority. And I've talked about some of our efforts, including drone assistance, license plate readers, security cameras in garages, cameras on the streets, signing bonuses to recruit more officers, the hiring of a recruiting firm to help us in this. And I did mention I went along on a ride along with police officers a couple months ago, had a chance to talk with them and other officers about the proliferation of guns. And this is not a Montgomery County problem. This is a national problem that we're having to address here at the local level. And I've talked to you before about the proliferation of unlicensed guns, known as ghost guns. But today I want to introduce a guest to talk about another way that someone can easily get a gun, and that's by taking a gun from a family member who does not store it properly. So Joanna Pearl is joining us. She's a local leader in Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. She, along with the Maryland chapter, have been busy over the last few weeks in Annapolis advocating for change, and I've asked her to join me today to talk about their legislative efforts and their Be Smart campaign. So thank you for being here today, Joanna.
Thank you, County Executive Elrich, and for inviting me to participate today. As the County Executive said, my name is Joanna Pearl and I live in Kensington. I am a volunteer with the Maryland chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. We are a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for common sense gun laws that keep our communities safe. We also work to encourage a culture of responsible gun ownership. We know that gun violence is a uniquely American public health and public safety crisis, and that Montgomery County is not immune. But we also know that gun violence is preventable, and we're committed to doing what it takes to keep families safe. Guns are the #1 killer of children and teens in America and here in Maryland. As adults, we are responsible for keeping children safe. And one way we can do that, which is what I'm going to talk about today, is through secure gun storage. That is, encouraging gun owners in our community to keep their guns unloaded, locked, and separate from ammunition, and encouraging everyone to open up a conversation about gun safety in their communities. Throughout our country, millions of children and teens live in homes with unsecured guns. Every year, 350 children living in America under the age of 18 gain access to a firearm and unintentionally shoot themselves or someone else, like a sibling, a parent, or a friend. Access to unsecured firearms also puts children and teens at increased risk of death by suicide with a gun. In school shootings, the data show that shooters are often current or former students who obtain guns from their home or the home of their relatives. And in many cases, the guns used were easily accessible or not securely stored. We have the power to prevent many child firearm deaths and other gun violence tragedies simply by talking about responsible gun ownership and what it means to store guns securely, and by inspiring a series of conversations about secure gun storage in our communities. Moms Demand Action volunteers help other adults learn about simple steps that everyone, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, can take to prevent these tragedies. One example is through the Be Smart campaign, an educational program launched in 2015 by the Everytown for Gun Safety Support Fund that takes action to prevent child access to guns, promote secure storage, and reduce the risk of suicide. Moms Demand Action volunteers share information about the Be Smart program to reduce the number of shootings that occur because guns have not been secured. Be Smart emphasizes the power of each adult to have agency over the safety of children and teens. We all want children to be safe from violence. And so through the program, we ask parents and caretakers to be smart, which is an acronym, by taking these simple steps. S is for secure. Secure all guns in homes and vehicles. Guns should be stored unloaded, locked, and separate from ammunition. M is for model. Model responsible behavior around guns. A is for ask. Ask about the presence of guns, the presence of unsecured firearms in the homes your child visits. R stands for recognize the role of guns in suicide. And T stands for tell. We ask people to tell your peers to be smart. By taking these steps, we can make Montgomery County safer and we can save lives. You can learn more about this program at besmartforkids.org, where there's information about trainings. You can sign up to bring a training about Be Smart to your community, and also information you can look at right on the website. Montgomery County has already taken important steps to educate the community on the risks associated with access to a firearm. Our county council recently passed, and the county executive later signed, the Suicide Awareness and Firearm Education Act, the SAFE Act, which requires gun retail establishments in the county to provide information about suicide prevention, firearm safety, and conflict resolution. We look forward to collaborating with the Department of Health and Human Services to make sure these materials are evidence-based and trauma-informed. And the SAFE Act is such a meaningful measure to increase public safety. We look forward to building on this good work by the council and the county executive because there's so much more to do. We are grateful for your partnership and the opportunity to speak about this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pearl. Members of the media, we're going to open it up right now for any questions regarding the efforts to combat gun violence. Please raise your hand if you have any questions regarding this particular topic. Any questions? No questions. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Pearl. You can remain on this event, or you can drop off if you need to go. Mr. County Executive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, and I appreciate all the work you do. I look at low-hanging fruit. Getting ghost guns is a simple legislative fix to say you'd have to deliver a ghost gun to a licensed gun dealer, just like you have to deliver a regular gun to a licensed gun dealer before you can buy it, which would assure that it's not a juvenile, would ensure that you didn't have a criminal record. I mean, it is so easy to fix this that it baffles me that people aren't willing to do it. The other thing was a disturbing story in the paper the other day about where the drug cartels get their guns, which is mostly from American gun manufacturers. So we have our own manufacturers in this country arming people in other countries so that they can distribute drugs, traffic in people, and have weapons in order to match the weapons that the police have in their countries. And the idea that companies here sell weapons that way and don't care about the end user is pretty nauseating. So more to ponder in terms of gun violence and what's wrong with this situation. But thank you for everything you do.
Thank you very much. Yeah, in separate efforts by Moms Demand Action, separate from the Be Smart campaign, we're actually looking and advocating for accountability for the gun industry to be possible in the state of Maryland. So I think what you're saying is really important. Thank you.
The moment you get legislation, let me know. Happy to help.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So moving to other issues, I'm going to go back to one of my favorite issues. Maryland counties need special taxing districts. And I was back in Annapolis yesterday testifying before the Ways and Means Committee on behalf of what I consider probably the most important bill in the legislature right now for Montgomery County. House Bill 919 would put counties like ours on even ground with municipalities in Maryland by allowing us to create special taxing districts and to differentiate taxes by different classes of property. Municipalities are allowed to tax different property classes, residential, condominium, farmland, commercial, at different rates. The counties are not allowed to do that, which makes it very difficult. If you need to solve a problem, every problem has to be solved. Say, for example, building infrastructure for developers winds up, if you want to do a bond, or you want to raise taxes, you have to raise it on the backs of residents as well as on commercial property. What I tried to emphasize to lawmakers is that this is an economic development opportunity that we've already seen work across the river in Northern Virginia. Developers and businesses continue to buy into this model and choose to leave lower taxed areas like Montgomery County for higher taxed areas like Fairfax and Tyson's Corner. I know this sounds counterintuitive to people who listen to the rhetoric of woe is me, we're overtaxed in Montgomery County. That's not what the facts show, at least not on commercial property. If you're in Montgomery County this year, your property tax is $1.04, same on commercial and residential. If you're in Tyson's Corner this year, you're about $1.50, and Fairfax is proposing a 4-cent tax increase this year would push you up to $1.54. So they're substantially higher than Montgomery County, yet developers go over there. So they're obviously not going there because it's a low tax jurisdiction for their development. They're going there because the taxes they collect are solely used to build the infrastructure they need to make places be better supportive of business. And I think the great example is Tyson's. Any of us have been around long enough to know Tyson's 15 years ago and Tyson's today know that it's two very different places. And they used their ability to raise revenue to make radical changes in Tyson's Corner. They used that ability to raise revenue to build a Potomac Yard station that cost them $250 million to build. And Montgomery County simply doesn't have access to those kind of revenues. Developers over there actually were part of the effort to get this taxing authority because they recognized that the taxes would build infrastructure. Infrastructure would improve the business environment and attract businesses. I think everybody would argue it kind of worked. And why we're looking at Virginia and asking, oh, gee, I wonder how they did this. You don't have to wonder very hard to understand how they did it. It's pretty clear what they did. They saw a way to use the tax money to build transportation infrastructure, and they obviously benefit as a business from having this infrastructure in place. It delivers projects in the master plans there on time. Montgomery County has no way of delivering projects on time. Our BRT, for example, is in many master plans. There is no funding to build most of the BRT network right now. And if we had these taxing districts and we had the ability to differentially tax, we'd be in a position to float bonds that we can't float right now and to go to the federal government and ask for more federal money because we could show what our match would be. Absent the ability to do that, we struggle to try to raise this money off of primarily county taxpayers and some money from the state and a little federal money sprinkled in. We could have built this a long time ago. I've said this before. When we started thinking about this, 15 years ago, maybe, one of the models we looked at was Toronto, Canada. And Toronto built the BRT system in basically 2 years. And the company that built it came down and met with me and with then County Executive Mike Leggett and explained what they did. Having access to funding sources let them very quickly build a project that helped transform Toronto and greatly improve their transportation network. We've got plans, but what we don't have right now is the money in this bill in the state legislature would help us move forward. The proposal is considered an enabling legislation. So any tax rates and who got taxed would have to be determined by the county council here. So I don't have the ability to implement it unilaterally, and the bill doesn't implement it unilaterally either. So there would be a lot of work on this. It was supported by the Maryland Association of Counties, and that's significant because it means most counties support the bill. Most importantly, it included the Republican counties. Even they understand how handicapped they are in not being able to raise their own revenues in order to meet the needs that they have in their counties. So we need to understand that state growth is tied to investments in transportation. You could talk to any business executive or economic development person who will tell you the importance of transportation for economic development. It's painfully clear that after learning the $3 billion shortfall in the state transportation funds late last year, that Maryland needs a better way to move forward. And the collapse of the state's infrastructure fund cannot be allowed to lead to totally paralyzing the construction of transportation. In Virginia, Tyson's Corner was transformed, as I said before. And what happened was that developers there and the political people there went to the Republican legislature and Republican governor and asked them to give the Northern Virginia's counties the authority to do this. They did it. They taxed. They bloomed. We didn't. And so we're looking for the ability to match what Virginia does. And sometimes they actually have better ideas than the other side of the river. Not everything that we think is cutting edge of the best practices, and we have to be aware of that. So we've already suffered through years of planning for fixes to our traffic dilemma, while current state revenue funding scenario leaves residents and counties needing more. And I'm asking for a favorable report out of the committee for House Bill 919 and support from the majority of the state lawmakers to enable state taxing districts for counties this session. And I would hope that the county council could decide to support the enabling legislation, because they ultimately would be the ones to have control over how it was implemented. So it doesn't tie them to any particular tax structure. What it does do is give them the ability to create something that would be beneficial for the people of this county and help us grow our business community. Finally, talking about health, March marks the 4th year since our nation began dealing with the widespread impacts of COVID-19. The emergency phase of the pandemic ended last year, but it's still being felt in our schools and our community continues to struggle with hunger issues and other aspects of community needs. So it's left a long trail. I won't say quite behind it, but it's left it in its wake. Last week, when I met with former County Executive Mike Leggett, he thanked me for the county's work throughout the pandemic. It was a struggle, but I know that our work saved lives, and that was the priority we put on the decisions we made. You can see in the results, the virus peaked in December 2021 with a weekly average of 800,000 cases nationwide. With the introduction of the first vaccine came a slow but significant drop in cases. Getting the word out about the benefits of the vaccine brought together many different communities across Montgomery County to share and spread life-saving information. And it was these partnerships that really, I think, made what we did possible in the county. Many of our community groups were able to reach deeper into their communities than the government could have. So we're really appreciative of all the work that all you did. COVID-19 arrived in Maryland. Since it arrived here, there have been 17,000 deaths here attributed to the virus, according to the state. And despite having the largest population of any county in Maryland, the rate of COVID-19 deaths per person in Montgomery County was just under 1%. That is among the lowest in the state and below the national average of over 1%. I'm proud that Montgomery County had one of the highest percentages of vaccine compliance in the nation, above 90% initially. That helps slow the spread of the disease and keep our mortality total relatively low. And I'm proud of all the work that we did here with our neighbors and friends and families to prevent more deaths. As we now live with isolated outbreaks and small waves of COVID-19, I want to stress how important it is to continue to protect yourself and your families. Vaccines for COVID-19 or flu are still recommended. COVID-19 vaccine can prevent serious illness and a hospital stay. So it's well worth taking advantage of that. And I guess on the last thing, I want to congratulate our HHS team and the Department of Recreation and Department of General Services and all of those folks for bringing together the Silver Spring Recreation and Aquatic Center. And before I turn it over to the HHS team, I want to take a moment to recognize the wonderful grand opening that occurred in Silver Spring Recreation and the Aquatic Center last weekend. This is the first county recreation center in downtown Silver Spring. The concept of building this facility in downtown Silver Spring was something that even the director of the Department of General Services thought was nuts when he first heard about it. Normally, to add community resources like this, you need a space. Rather than being defeated by how much room there was around us, we started designing up, and the new facility is spread across 120,000 square feet through 4 stories, and it's integrated into a new affordable housing senior development in Silver Spring, the Leggett House. So we managed to take about a block of land and be able to do multiple things with it for the benefit of the community. Resources have not always been distributed evenly across Montgomery County. When I was on the council, I saw how County Executive Mike Leggett stressed the need to revamp the recreation centers in the county that were in the Black communities that have been allowed to age and become dilapidated. They're in pretty bad shape. And when I came in, he made the determination that we were going to prioritize the community centers in these communities. We built some nice, bright, shiny objects elsewhere while refusing to invest here. And he was willing to take this on and make the kind of changes that we needed to do. And I'd say it was one of the impetuses for ultimately what became the racial equity work that we're doing, the willingness to look at how we spend our money and where we spend our money to make sure that that our money is spent in all parts of the community for all the residents of the community. And so I'm very, very excited about it. In that building, aside from the apartments building, there's also the Holy Cross Health Center next door that provides people state-of-the-art and direct access to the amenities. This is a crown jewel, and it's a facility for our entire area, and I hope it drives more interest in our county's wonderful spring and summer rec programs now that we have additional capacity to serve more residents. I also want to remind residents that they can access the rec center gyms free. So a policy we started a year ago, the gyms still remain free. You still have to pay for any use of all pools. That's true for all the pools in the county. But you can sign up for a free pass to any of our recreation centers across the county. And I do encourage you to visit our new facility in Silver Spring for a workout. So now I'd like to turn it over to the health team for any updates you have on public health.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Just a very brief update this week that we continue to see increasing transmissions in influenza and a little uptick in COVID. Most of this is being driven by our younger populations, which we're seeing come out in higher numbers to the emergency departments for treatment for influenza. Those are not turning into inpatients, so our hospitals have not, outside of the emergency departments, have not been affected disproportionately yet. But we just want to remind folks to urge caution. You know, if you have respiratory disease, particularly in your children, you know, try to keep them isolated from older people or those who are at greater risk, or have them wear masks when they're in their presence. We want to keep these diseases from spreading to our more vulnerable populations. So those are the updates on the respiratory report, and I'd like to see if Dr. Bridgers has any other comments at this time.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. I just want to thank our county executive for entrusting the Department of Health and Human Services to really take a deeper dive and look at common sense best practices that bring more resources to the community to combat youth safety, gun violence. We've worked really hard in collaborations with our community partners like our recreation department and our public services and all those other agencies, and Mom on Demand, our non-governmental organizations that really work with us to look at common sense solutions. So I wanted to thank and acknowledge the county executive under his leadership for entrusting the department to really look at how we can resolve some of these community level challenges that many face, but we're really looking at it in determining better outcomes for Montgomery County citizens. So thank you, Mr. County Executive.
Thank you, Dr. Bridgers. Thank you, gentlemen. Members of the media, we're going to open it up right now for the last set of questions, Q&A. If you have any questions, raise your hand regarding these topics or any other questions for the county executive. We'll give it a second. Any more questions? Going once? Going twice? I guess we don't have any more questions for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.